Part 3, A Focus on Recovery. We want to introduce Part 3 by mentioning something we really liked that a client named Daryl said. Daryl was a 45-year-old builder and a person with a very good analytical mind. As a child, he had been badly neglected within his home and then sexually abused during a placement in foster care. As an adult, he had struggled with alcohol until a few years before we met him. During a group session, he said something which rang true about recovery. Quote, "Insight is really important, but it's not enough. I had some fairly good insight many years ago, but it didn't do the job on its own. You have to live the solution." End quote. Daryl's point makes intuitive sense to most people who struggle with trauma. Insight really is essential, and it's a form of inner change. Without being able to connect the dots, many people will unconsciously recreate distress that reflects the disturbance of their childhood experiences. Recall the earlier chapter on re traumatization. However, as Daryl suggests, insight doesn't do the job on its own. Many people with good insight will continue to traverse well worn, painful patterns. In addition to insight, it's also necessary to experiment concerning your life and relationships, and there are countless ways to do this. Insight can be thought of as a trustworthy base from which to experiment further. Much of what follows will continue to encourage insight, but the emphasis will shift towards, as Daryl eloquently put it, living the solution. The very mention of experimentation or change can elicit anxiety in some who experienced childhood harm. If this is the case, keep in mind that you are in control of how you use the guidebook and can go at a pace which is manageable. Group Session 14, Being Present and Connected. If paying attention is a train, then trauma is the cow standing on the tracks. A line from Gary's journaling. Quote, "My friend took me to this meditation group once. Oh my God, I wanted to shoot myself after about 3 minutes. I don't think I was meditating, unless meditating means trying to figure out how to escape from a room full of people without anyone noticing." End quote. Janine. Past trauma has a way of interfering with our capacity to attend and feel connected to life, others, and ourselves. Trauma does this by controlling our mental lives, thoughts, images, memories, and our body-based experiences. This chapter is going to explore what for some people can seem like a strangely unfamiliar question. What thoughts or images do you actually want to have in your mind? And how do you want to feel within your own body? If you have thoughts or body-based sensations which are undermining attention and connection, can you notice them and exert some sense of control? You may be familiar with this topic, but the idea that we can notice and exert control over trauma-based thoughts and body-based experiences can be a strangely new idea to some people we work with, or others may be familiar with this idea but really lack confidence that control is possible. For many, it has always been others who seem to control their thoughts, emotions, and body-based experiences, so it may be difficult to imagine they can have control or even a sense of permission to exert control. Our view is that your mental and body-based experiences belong to you, to whatever extent you lack confidence to manage them. This chapter is an invitation to see if you can move things in the direction of recovery. Some will have experience with this topic and perhaps some confidence, but for others it can seem new. If it feels like a beginning or you really lack confidence, that's okay. To be fair, It's a really difficult topic for many, and much of the remainder of the guidebook will build on ideas found here from a number of perspectives. We also explore the practice of mindfulness and what is referred to as the observing self. It would not be surprising if you were familiar with mindfulness, as it has become incredibly popular through book publications and social media over the past 30 years. You may have positive associations with mindfulness. However, a number of people we have worked with dislike the idea of mindfulness, and some have had negative experiences with it. Here are some actual quotes: I hate mindfulness, I stopped reading, and this stuff is patronizing. If you have developed negative ideas about mindfulness, we encourage you to continue. We have looked very closely at any available research and clinical observations which help us understand how mindfulness can be safe and helpful and why it can go wrong for people struggling with trauma symptoms. We have also listened very closely to clients we have worked with and have rewritten this chapter a number of times to get it as right as possible. There are both risks and opportunities in recommending mindfulness for people with a trauma history, and we have been careful to explore mindfulness in what we believe is a trauma sensitive way. And any discussion of mindfulness is explored from an entirely non religious perspective, so it should not conflict with religious beliefs the reader may hold. The important role of attention. Paying attention can include a sense of concentration, being absorbed in what you are doing, feeling in control, and a loss of self consciousness. When an individual is truly absorbed in what they are doing, this has been described as a state of flow. The capacity for attending or concentrating has been connected to being able to learn, feelings of competence, well being, and happiness, as well as self esteem. Being absorbed in what has meaning, importance, or value is a powerful symptom of well being. The ability to pay attention can be considered both a cause and a symptom of well being. We might say that a feature of recovery is to become so focused on what has value that the traumas from the past begin to lose their hold over you. Everyone who has experienced childhood trauma is unique, and yet one of the issues they tend to share in common is a difficulty with attention. This is reflected within the historically proposed diagnosis of developmental trauma disorder, which indicates problems with attentional dysregulation. Attentional difficulties can express themselves in many ways: problems with concentration, difficulty staying connected to people and events around you, not being aware of the signals coming from your body, accident proneness, going into a room and not remembering why you went in there, losing personal items, brain fog, forgetting appointments or being late, etc. Individuals who experienced childhood trauma are far more likely to be given a diagnosis of attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD. Symptoms of ADHD, such as inattentiveness, difficulty concentrating and focusing, hyperactivity, and impulsivity, are often seen to result from a brain chemistry imbalance. It might be the case that an individual with a trauma history currently has a brain chemistry imbalance, but what's the underlying cause? Is it simply a matter of biology, or does past trauma and associated PTSD issues play a role? And was a trauma history properly assessed and considered when a diagnosis of ADHD was made? If we don't know the answers to these questions for a particular individual, we can't understand the nature of their attentional problems. Problems with attention associated with abuse or neglect are often first seen in school performance. In the classroom, such children are more likely to struggle with concentration, can be either passive or blow up with anger, or appear to be spaced out. The result is often impaired reading ability, lower grades, and more days of school absence. Difficulties with school performance can then do further harm to an already compromised self image. Problems with attention don't evaporate when an individual becomes an adult at the age of 18. We mentioned Robin before, a woman who experienced neglect and deprivation within the family home and was sent to live with an aunt at 8, where things did not improve much. While the expression of attentional difficulties varies between individuals, Robin's description is familiar. Quote, sometimes my kids are talking to me and I realize I have no idea what they're saying, or I'm listening to a podcast and I'm suddenly aware that I don't know what's going on. It's like I'm in two places at the same time. End quote. In a sense, Robin is in two places at the same time. She's in the world at this moment, wanting to listen to her children or a podcast, and she is experiencing the effects of childhood harm. Trauma is interfering with her capacity to be present in the moment and connected to the world around her. Being connected to the present moment while suffering the effects of trauma is like trying to listen to the radio through a lot of static. Understanding how past abuse or neglect has contributed to difficulties with attention can help some people look at problems concerning achievement and relationships with more insight and self compassion. George is a man in his 40s who experienced childhood sexual abuse and substantial bullying from peers and teachers at school. Quote, at school, I always just thought I was stupid. When I was older, I lost a couple of jobs and it felt like I was in school all over again. But I was scared and worrying all the time. End quote. George had decided that his problems at school and work were because he was stupid, but George was not able to pay attention at school or work because you have to feel safe in order to pay attention. More about this later. This insight opened the door for self compassion rather than self blame. We mentioned Bob in a previous chapter, an individual who was neglected by his mother and abused by a stepfather. He laughed when he described his experience, but his problems connecting to the world were very real. Quote, my head is like a movie which has no plot and a bad soundtrack. Songs get stuck, all sorts of random thoughts, ridiculous scenarios playing out. It's like having a room where there is so much rubbish that's been piled up, you can't really do much in there. End quote. If you can identify with having attentional problems, it's useful to point out that attention is like any other skill. It can be worked on and developed. This chapter will support you in this manner. But first, let's look in more detail at why those who experienced childhood harm are more likely to experience problems with attention. Attention and the need for safety. What's different about individuals with a traumatic history and those who largely felt cared for and protected? Certainly, one difference relates to a core feature of PTSD, a heightened sense of threat. Individuals who experienced circumstances of childhood harm and often further trauma in adulthood tend to feel less safe in the world and in their bodies. Being able to attend and feel connected requires that you feel reasonably safe. When anyone feels a sense of threat, they will try to find ways of responding, of trying to get to safety. Over the years, we have noticed certain ways individuals respond to a sense of threat. These all are genuine attempts to seek safety, but especially when there is a background of trauma, they can each disrupt attention and connection. They can be sneaky, powerful, and compelling. There can be a part of you that feels you must respond in the ways indicated below, which is one of the reasons recovery can feel so challenging. 1. Ruminating over social encounters. Childhood harm was interpersonal. It was other people who were scaring, hurting, or neglecting you. So it's understandable that today it's relational experiences that can seem threatening. In her 60s, Diane felt lonely and wanted a sense of community and connection, but this was scary. Quote, sometimes I can go to the coffee morning at our village hall, but I worry so much that it's hard for me to focus on what people are saying, and my mind goes blank. End quote. And it's not just spending time worrying about present or future events, but also past events. Shelley was emotionally neglected and spent the latter part of childhood in care. Quote, after I've been with people, I can spend ages pulling it all apart. Did I make a joke that offended someone? Did someone think I was bragging because I mentioned the holiday we went on? I complimented someone, but did they take it the wrong way? This is why I sometimes don't even want to be with people. End quote. Social fears are understandable for those with a history of being harmed by others. Mental worry is a way of trying to seek safety and protection. At some level of consciousness, people imagine if I worry enough, perhaps I can find safety. However, for those with a trauma history, mental worry is more often a problem than a solution. And ruminating about future or past social encounters drags a person out of the present moment. In this way, worry and social anxiety can hijack our attention. 2. Shame. We will be exploring this feeling in detail in a later chapter, but trauma based shame is a feeling of badness with respect to ourselves. It's a sense of inadequacy or defectiveness which I feel about myself. When trauma based shame is triggered, it can seem like it's fundamentally about a current event, some mistake we made, real or imagined. But shame is this old feeling that has been around since it was generated all those years ago through abusive experiences. When trauma based shame gets activated in the here and now, punitive self talk can cloud over the world happening right in front of us. We are not paying attention or connected to life or others because we are in our heads with this feeling of shame and punitive self talk taking center stage. For those who have abusive histories, shame can seem like a necessary, punishing feeling which can protect a person from making mistakes in the future. But, as we explore in a later chapter, trauma based shame is a fundamentally unhelpful and unnecessary feeling. If possible, you may need to take this on trust for the moment. 3. Stuck anger. It's important to acknowledge that individuals who experience childhood harm, and often further harm in later life, can have very genuine reasons to feel anger. Trauma occurring in relationships that were supposed to be safe is fundamentally wrong and unjust, and anger is a normal and understandable reaction. However, the way that anger can be experienced by some people who have experienced trauma can interfere with attention and connection. In his late 50s, Adam experienced abusive parents, years of school bullying, and an abusive partnership of more than 20 years. He seemed to need the first 15 minutes of every therapy session to vent anger about the government, the other drivers on the road, the utility company, his neighbor's dog, etc. At one point, his therapist suggested He'd journal any angry scenarios which start running in his mind. His response was interesting. Quote, I spend a huge amount of time with these angry fantasies running around in my head. It's things from the past, things going on at the moment, but there are also these angry scenarios where I'm getting some sort of revenge. I don't plan to do it, but it just goes on. It's exhausting. End quote. The angry mental scenarios Adam experiences are not unusual for many people who are traumatized. For Adam, his anger was often directed outward at others or the world. For others, stuck anger can be directed inwards at themselves for real or imagined mistakes. Anger is an emotion designed to protect us or others. Anger is the emotional counterpart to the fight aspect of the fight or flight response. The problem for many who are traumatized can be that they are feeling anger about past or present events which they can't or don't feel able to fight against. So, the images and thoughts driving anger circulate around the individual's head and body. Anger was designed to be a short acting emotion which motivates us to protect ourselves, get a need met, or set something right. But if anger is an emotion we are living with that is based in past trauma, it can seem like the one getting hurt is ourselves. Part of the hurt is that stuck anger interferes with our ability to pay attention and connect to what is important in the present moment. 4. Intrusive, unwanted memories. Another understandable symptom of PTSD is re experiencing. These are memories of events which have not been processed or put to bed. These memories can be triggered by associated events or come out of the blue, and they usually arrive with difficult physical sensations, emotions, and thoughts. Typically, they are memories of experiences where we were harmed and frightened, or they may be upsetting memories of times we imagine we did not cope well or made mistakes we regret. Like social worry and stuck anger, intrusive, unwanted memories are designed to protect us. The body and brain seem to be saying, if you keep in mind what was disturbing from your past, then maybe you can avoid harm in the future. Continuing to remember distressing experiences has been a part of trying to remain safe for most of human history. If I went into a cave last week and there was a saber-toothed tiger in there, I will have reoccurring memories of feeling frightened by the tiger. These memories encourage me to avoid going back into that cave. However, if the danger of the past is now over, associated distressing memories are not serving the purpose they were designed for. Rather than keeping us safe, these memories have become a problem. And within our daily life, intrusive, unwanted memories wrench us out of the present moment and into the past. When this happens, it's very difficult to pay attention or stay connected to the world in front of us. 5. Frantic mind. Earlier in the chapter, we mentioned Bob, who told us that his head was, quote, like a movie with no plot and a bad soundtrack, end quote. It's a good example of what might be called frantic mind. What we are suggesting is that feeling unsafe is what compromises attention and connection. Sometimes the sense of threat has an obvious source, like being in a crowded superstore. However, some people tell us they feel this sense of threat in their bodies. They can just wake up with a sense of something bad happening, or it catches up with them at certain times. So, their minds may go at a frantic pace to avoid anything upsetting. The mind leaps from one thing to another without being able to focus for any period of time. Slowing down mentally sitting quietly, or listening attentively may not seem like something they can afford to do. The mind may fill up with random thoughts, stuck music, repetitive phrases, etc. It's like mental filler. Frantic mind is a way of trying to protect yourself from something scary or upsetting. It's a means of pushing away or suppressing memories or other effects of trauma. Even though a frantic mind is trying to protect you, it can be very tiring and get in the way of paying attention or connecting to what is in front of you. If you struggle with attention for any of the above reasons, it's important not to punish yourself. Trauma results in an individual feeling less safe in the world. Social worry, shame, stuck anger, unwanted memories, and frantic mind are all attempts to seek safety. They may compromise attention and connection in the moment, but they are not irrational, and no one is failing for falling into these difficulties. As mentioned, an individual can feel compelled to respond in these ways, but you can have some control if you can see what is happening. Exercise 1. We described 5 consequences of historical trauma which can interfere with your ability to pay attention and connect with the world. They are ruminating over social encounters, shame, stuck anger, intrusive, unwanted memories, frantic mind. Everyone is different, so you may recognize that some of these issues are more problematic than others. How do they affect you and your ability to attend and connect? Please pause the audio and complete exercise 1 in the guidebook. Paying attention and mindfulness. By paying attention, we are referring to our ability to focus on what we need to. It means having a sense of connection to our immediate experience, taking in what your friend is saying, concentrating on doing the dishes or making a repair, being aware that you are cold, noticing that your heart is beating harder, being aware of thoughts and images that are generating anger. However, our capacity for attention should also allow us to decide on what we do not want to pay attention to. We should not only be able to focus our attention on what makes sense, but we should also be able to shift our attention away from what we do not wish to experience. Focusing attention and being able to shift focus are equally important attentional skills. The human brain has changed very little over tens of thousands of years, so it's not surprising that there has been an interest in the relationship between paying attention and well being for most of recorded history. Traditions such as Buddhism have explored the role of attention for 2,500 years, and the Sanskrit word sati was used to refer to remembering, or with respect to personal development, remembering to attend to the present moment. The word mindfulness was an English translation of sati used in 1910 by a Buddhist scholar named Rhys Davids. And the popularization of the term and practice of mindfulness really began in earnest in the 1980s and 1990s with teachers such as John Kabat-Zinn. So, what is mindfulness? Most definitions of mindfulness emphasize paying attention to experience in the present moment. This can mean paying attention to the world in front of you, your book, someone speaking, the feel of the soapy water as you do the dishes, or paying attention to your inner world, thoughts, feelings, or body sensations. Many definitions of mindfulness add the idea of paying attention to present experience without judgment. Not leaping to judge or place value on your experience can sometimes allow an individual to see what's happening with more clarity. However, in respect to people with a trauma history, it's important not to take the idea of being non judgmental too far. Mindfulness should allow for all experiences, and there are times when making a judgment is part of your authentic and acceptable experience. What happened was wrong and it should not have occurred. Judgments like this are a part of mindfulness too. Being non judgmental simply means accepting that it's okay to have whatever thoughts come up. Can mindfulness be helpful to those with the trauma history and trauma symptoms, or does it come with risks? This is worth exploring before we go any further. As we have said all along, safety and stability are the fundamental basis for recovery. Let's look at the potential benefits of mindfulness and then explore some concerns. In one way or another, mindfulness exercises are designed to help an individual focus on the present moment and connect to others and life. Childhood trauma can drag an individual out of the present moment and into a past laden with distressing memories and associated feelings. Or a history of past harm can pull a person out of the present moment as they worry excessively about imagined future threats. So, if mindfulness can help a person stay connected to the present, it would seem to be an especially good fit for those who experienced trauma. It also needs to be said that mindfulness is evidence based, and studies have shown that it can help with many problems which often coincide with trauma, including anxiety, depression, and substance misuse. A review of 18 studies found that mindfulness for adults can be helpful in reducing symptoms of PTSD, including reductions in avoidance and shame based self appraisals. Another review of 17 studies suggests that mindfulness can be helpful specifically for adults who experienced childhood harm. But there were concerns raised about potential negative effects and the need for mindfulness to be adapted for this group of individuals. Despite the positive indications, it's very difficult to know whether mindfulness will be helpful and safe for any individual who is struggling with the effects of childhood trauma. For one thing, there is no such thing as mindfulness practice. There are many different mindfulness practices or exercises. As we will discuss, our experience is that certain mindfulness exercises may be safer, gentler, and more helpful than others for those who have experienced childhood harm. For those with the trauma history, a second concern is that some mindfulness practices may cause these individuals to be more exposed to symptoms of trauma. What many mindfulness exercises have in common is that they ask an individual to slow down and attend to present experience. For those not struggling with trauma reactions, the individual might experience a heightened connection with thoughts, emotions, and life. For those who struggle with unresolved symptoms of trauma, the experience of slowing down and paying attention may result in a heightened experience of trauma symptoms. An important feature of recovery is about slowing down so you can pay attention and get connected with your experience, the life in front of you, your relationships, your body sensations, your feelings, and your thoughts. But when you slow down and pay attention, there is a possibility you will be more exposed to trauma symptoms. This catch 22 scenario is just another reason why childhood trauma is so damn unfair. So, what are we to do? Over some years of trying out different versions of this chapter with clients, we believe we have found a balanced approach to mindfulness that is helpful and less likely to lead to destabilization. While there are many different mindfulness exercises, There are two broad ways that mindfulness is done. First, there is mindfulness meditation. This most often involves sitting or lying down while doing a formal mindfulness exercises. There are many ways of doing this, but an example is focusing your attention on the intake and exhalation of the breath. Second, there is mindfulness living. With mindfulness living, you continue to go about your daily life, but you apply mindfulness to whatever you are doing. For those struggling with trauma symptoms, our experience is that mindfulness meditation can be more likely to exacerbate trauma symptoms for some people, whereas mindfulness living exercises can be safer. This is a point made by David A. Treleaven in his excellent book, Trauma Sensitive Meditation. Quote, I'm sometimes asked whether it's mindfulness that's problematic for survivors or whether it's mindfulness meditation that causes issues. As you will see, I lean toward the latter. We agree with Treleaven. The reason more formal mindfulness meditation exercises can cause problems for certain traumatized people is that they ask you to slow down, shut out the rest of the world, and focus attention in a narrow manner. This can leave some more exposed to trauma symptoms. It's possible that mindfulness meditation may be very helpful to you, and it would be patronizing to suggest you should not attempt it. But we are saying approach it with thoughtfulness. In this chapter, we will introduce you to 3 exercises for mindful living. For those who are interested, we will briefly say more about mindfulness meditation at the end of the chapter. The observing self, the key to making mindfulness work. Mindfulness is not mysterious or mystical. It just means paying attention to experience in the present moment, whether we are attending to the world and people in front of us, or the inner world of thoughts, feelings, or sensations. In mindfulness, our attention has a quality of concentration and focus. We feel a sense of connection, whether we are aware of the soapy dishwater as we do the washing up, the words our friend is speaking, the mental planning we are doing as we think about the grocery shopping, or the awareness that we are cold. However, as we explored earlier, when the effects of past trauma show up, they disrupt our attention and connection to present experience. Here's an analogy which may help. Suppose you planned a really nice dinner party and it's going well. People are enjoying the food, drink, and each other's company. Suddenly, an uninvited guest arrives who tells offensive jokes, spills beer all over the carpet, and starts an argument. The uninvited guest, that's trauma symptoms. So, what is the observing self, and how does it support mindfulness? The part of us that can step back from our immediate experiencing, that's what we call the observing self. It sometimes goes by other names, such as dual awareness or metaperception. The observing self is a natural cognitive ability, so you probably have a sense of it. For our purposes, if we are engaged in life in some manner and then trauma symptoms start interfering and distracting, the observing self is that part of us that can notice that trauma symptoms are occurring. You might think, wait a minute, if I'm experiencing trauma symptoms, I must be aware that I'm experiencing trauma symptoms. Actually, we can sometimes be so close to our experience that we don't have the necessary distance to really notice the experience. We can get fused with the experience, meaning we are on autopilot. If this seems complicated, here's an example. We mentioned Daniel previously, a military veteran who had been raised by an unstable and rejecting single mother. His darts club had organized an outing at a time when he had to be at work. Quote, all these angry thoughts kept going through my head. They know I have to work, so why plan it then? None of them really care if I'm in the club or not. Most of them are insensitive assholes. End quote. Daniel had fantasies of writing an angry resignation email. Then, Daniel had a moment when he was able to access his observing self. He wasn't just having those angry thoughts and images. He could step back and observe what was happening. He stopped in the middle of his kitchen and thought, oh wow, I have been walking around the house, getting almost nothing done for the past 2 hours, my head full of all these angry thoughts and fantasies. He was no longer fused with the angry thoughts and images because he was observing what was happening with some distance. Trauma reactions get baked into our psychology through frightening experiences. So when triggered, we experience them automatically. Your observing self is your cognitive ability to have awareness that trauma symptoms are occurring. People who experience trauma can feel overwhelmed by body based and emotional reactions, especially when triggered and emotionally dysregulated. It can seem like they are just their reactions. They are so close to the reactions that it may not occur to them that they can have some control over what is occurring. The observing self allows you to get some distance. Imagine a washing machine that has a glass window. It's running, and clothing and suds are flying around in there. A trauma based reaction can feel like you are inside the washing machine. Accessing the observing self is more like you are outside the washing machine and looking through the window as you watch the churning suds and clothing. You are paying attention, but you are not getting thrown about. Because you have some distance, you can bring curiosity or reflection to the experience. You can then have more control over how you want to react. Direct or spontaneous experience can be great, and we don't want to go through life seeing everything from the perspective of the observing self. But if trauma symptoms are hijacking our ability to pay attention and feel a sense of connection, having enough distance to observe that this is occurring can allow us to redirect our attention. If you are anxious and worrying, the observing self can notice this, and you may think, oh wow, I've been worrying for 20 minutes now and really upsetting myself. If you have been mentally reliving a disturbing experience, the observing self can notice this, and you may think, wow, I've spent the last 15 minutes remembering what happened 10 years ago, and the muscles in my shoulders are all tense. There are countless ways the observing self can step in and allow you more awareness of your experiences. Direct experience of trauma symptoms can be like walking around in a storm, exposed to the cold wind and rain. Accessing the observer self can create a moment where you now experience the storm from behind a window. So, how can mindfulness and the observing self work together? Mindfulness just means paying attention to experience in the present moment. The observing self can support mindfulness in the following way. If paying attention in the present moment, or being mindful, is disturbed by trauma symptoms, the observing self can notice this is happening. By having awareness of the trauma symptoms, you can choose to redirect your attention, if this is what you wish to do. It's important to point out that being mindful and using the observing self are not means of suppression, distraction, or avoidance. Through the observing self, you are noticing trauma symptoms. You pay attention to it for a moment, but you are also aware of how it is compromising your attention or ability to feel connected to life and others, as well as what is important for you at this moment. And if you wish, you are now able to redirect your attention. Mindfulness living, noticing thoughts and images. This exercise is designed to help you get a sense of using mindfulness and the observing self together. First, you need to select some task that will take anywhere from 3 to 20 minutes. It can be making a cup of tea or coffee, doing laundry, cleaning the kitchen or bathroom, doing the dishes, mopping or vacuuming, gardening, washing a car, grooming a pet, etc. To make this easier, try to avoid complex tasks that require hard thinking, like cooking a difficult meal or making a challenging repair. See if you can do the task mindfully. If you are folding laundry, simply pay attention to folding the laundry. If you are loading the dishwasher, merely pay attention to loading the dishwasher. If you are vacuuming, just pay attention to vacuuming. What is likely to happen is that while you are doing the task, you will have verbal thoughts or visual images come into your mind. If the thoughts or images are about your task, that's fine. You are all in one place. However, if the thoughts or images have nothing to do with your task, your mind is elsewhere. If you can notice these thoughts or images, you are using your observing self. You may say to yourself, I'm thinking about. Now, see if you can return your full attention to the task. It will be interesting to see if the thoughts or images that come into your mind are quite ordinary or whether they are trauma symptoms, e.g., social worry, angry scenarios, frantic mind material, or intrusive unwanted memories. If this is the case, you can respond in the same way. The observing self notices the thoughts or images, and then you return your attention to your task. Exercise 2, noticing thoughts and images. When you have completed this exercise, see if you can describe the experience below. How easy or difficult was it to mindfully attend to the task? Were you able to bring your observing self to your experience, which helped you have awareness of thoughts or images which interfered with mindful attention on your task? Were thoughts or images of a harmless and ordinary form, or were they trauma-based? Please pause the audio and complete exercise 2 in the guidebook. What was the point of the previous exercise? If trauma symptoms are interfering with attention and connection, mindfulness and the observing self can help you see the trauma symptoms rather than just be the trauma symptoms. When you see that symptoms interfere with attending and connecting, there can be a moment in which you decide to take control and direct your attention. Traumatic events share one thing in common. You did not feel safe or in control. Even small moments where you can feel a sense of control in respect to trauma symptoms can feel important. Trying to be mindful all the time is probably too much for most of us, and allowing for spontaneity and mental slack is healthy too. However, as Jon Kabat-Zinn likes to say, you can drop into mindfulness whenever you want. The exercise you just did, it's not designed to be done once. You can literally drop into this way of living whenever you need to. If you are feeling mentally scattered or disconnected from life, you can decide to drop into mindfulness and consciously pay attention to life as you are experiencing it. And as you pay attention to your direct experience, the observing self can be there like a good friend, keeping an eye on things and allowing you to redirect attention as you wish. Mindfulness living, noticing body sensations. As clinicians such as Bessel van der Kolk and Peter Levine have convincingly pointed out, traumatic experience is stored away in our bodies. Clients who experienced childhood abuse and neglect seem to understand this intuitively. If past experiences of childhood harm get triggered in the moment, it's not just thoughts or memories which begin to play through an individual's mind. The body itself remembers these events and will react. Muscles constrict, breathing accelerates, and other physiological reactions occur that we are not even aware of. Hormones such as adrenaline and cortisol entering the bloodstream. It's even possible that whatever is triggering a reaction is outside our conscious awareness, but our brains and bodies are picking up on it anyway. Most traumatized individuals have had experiences where they are in objectively safe circumstances, but their bodies are reacting as if there was a threat. Have you ever had thoughts like, I'm just sitting in a cafe with a friend. Why is my heart pounding? If the effects of trauma are living on in our bodies, it makes sense that a lot of traumatized people do not want to pay attention to what is going on in their bodies. Drugs and alcohol, OCD, deliberate self harm, or obsessions with food can all be ways of trying to get rid of body sensations or at least distract ourselves from them. But all of this comes with a cost. If we are not able to have some awareness of what's happening in our bodies, it's hard to respond to body distress. So, how might trauma show up in our bodies? There are many ways, but three are common: muscle constriction, shallow or quick breathing, or a general shaking or trembling. Let's look at these briefly. Muscles constrict to prepare us to run, fight, or protect organs from attack. This is very useful if we are genuinely threatened by physical assault, but problematic if we are physically safe. If past trauma means we are unconsciously constricting muscles for periods of time, this can contribute to headaches, jaw pain, back and neck pain, frozen joints, loss of movement, or pinched nerves. Breathing, which is shallow and quick, is a natural nervous system response to a perception of threat, whether or not we are consciously aware of the threat. There may be times when you are aware you are breathing in a shallow or quick manner, despite being in reasonably safe circumstances. Shaking or trembling is a normal response when adrenaline is released in response to a real or imagined threat. Also, following a traumatic experience, most mammals will shake as a way of discharging excess energy and coming down from a frightening experience. So, some people who have a trauma history and who continue to experience a perception of threat, real or imagined, can find they shake or tremble. For some, shaking or a tremor comes and goes. For others, it's often there in a low grade way and can be more pronounced in times of stress. Exercise 2 is similar to exercise 1, but with a couple of differences. Rather than being aware of thoughts and images, you will be using the observing self to notice body based reactions or sensations. You can choose a task as you did in exercise 1 and use the observing self to notice body based reactions while being mindful of the task. Or you can do this with a bit more flexibility. Just keep the practices of mindfulness and the observing self in mind. When you are working around the house or are out and about, maybe driving or at the store or work, you can access mindfulness and the observing self and check in on what's happening in your body. The observing self can notice muscles that are constricting. Common locations are shoulders riding high, abdominal muscles constricting, jaw or teeth clenched, area around the eyes tight, buttocks or legs constricted. The observing self may notice times when breathing is quick and shallow with no obvious threat, or the observing self may notice shaking or a tremor. If you are doing exercise 2, notice constricted muscles and you are safe. An obvious response is to let the constriction go. If you notice quick and shallow breathing, the breathing exercise you learned towards the start of the program can be a helpful response. Or just take a large breath, hold it for as long as comfortable, and blow out slowly. That can discharge a surprising amount of trauma based tension. Trembling can be a bit trickier, but relaxing muscles, breathing, and aerobic exercise can all help. Exercise 3, noticing body sensations. If you are able to bring your observing self to certain experiences and notice muscle constriction, shallow or quick breathing, or shaking, you are welcome to journal below your experience and any means you tried to respond. What was this like? Please pause the audio and complete exercise 3 in the guidebook. Mindfulness of present experience when it's really difficult. You may have found the previous ideas interesting and helpful. Perhaps mindfulness has helped you be more consciously connected to immediate experience. Perhaps the idea of the observing self is creating a bit of space which allows you to see rather than just be a trauma response. However, we are realistic with respect to how tricky and powerful trauma symptoms can be. It's not unusual for people to say things like, this mindfulness stuff, this observing self stuff, it may help other people, but if I'm really struggling, I just can't make it work. This is understandable. You know how certain products are sold as extra strength? There is a way of being mindful which is a bit like that. In exercise 1, you were being mindful of some task, just paying attention to whatever the task was. The mindfulness skill we are suggesting here works as follows. In addition to bringing your attention to present experience, you literally describe your experience in real time. You might call this skill mindfulness of present experience with narration. We mentioned Donald earlier. He was the guy who gave us that fantastic metaphor to describe the way he struggles with traumatic memories. This was the metaphor about how he's standing in a pool trying to hold a ball underwater. He was due to pick up his daughter from primary school when he got triggered and began experiencing unwanted childhood memories. He needed to walk to his daughter's school, but he felt scared and confused. As he did what was necessary, he was mindful of present experience with narration. Quote, okay, I'm checking to make sure the dog is in the house. Now I'm putting my sunglasses on. I'm opening the front door, and now I'm closing it behind me. I'm walking down the path to the front gate, and I can feel the sun on my face, and it's warm. I can hear someone cutting the grass. I'm opening the gate, and now I'm closing it behind me. I'm walking down our street, and I can hear birds, and my neighbor is putting out their rubbish. End quote. Donald narrated his way mindfully all the way to school. His narration brings him back to the now, and the intrusive traumatic memories lose a grip on him. Recovery from trauma is not about suppressing memories or future worries, but about choosing when and how to deal with it all. Donald used mindfulness of present experience with narration because it was important for him to remain present and connected for his daughter. Exercise 4. Mindfulness of present experience with narration. If you are really struggling and require an extra strength application of mindfulness, you can try mindfulness of present experience with narration. You are welcome to journal any experiences below. How did it go? Was it useful? Please pause the audio and complete exercise 4 in the guidebook. Information on mindfulness meditation for those who are interested. We mentioned previously that there are two ways to apply mindfulness living and mindfulness meditation. Mindfulness living is where you apply mindfulness to life as you are directly living it. Mindfulness meditation involves a number of practices where you are focusing attention in a specific way, most often when sitting, lying down, or walking. We have explored a few mindfulness living exercises in this chapter, paying special attention to the observing self, but have said little about mindfulness meditation. In our experience, mindfulness meditation exercises may be more challenging as they require the individual to really slow down and let go of certain defenses. Some of the individuals working with this guidebook may be able to benefit from mindfulness meditation now, but for others, it may not be the right time in their recovery. The reason we do not specifically describe and encourage mindfulness meditation exercises in this guidebook is we can't know who it's likely to be safe and beneficial for and who may be left more exposed to trauma symptoms. If mindfulness meditation is something you are quite interested in and you want to learn more, there are numerous books and resources available. John Kabat-Zinn's Wherever You Go, There You Are is a well-rounded introduction to mindfulness and a good starting place for many. Joining a meditation or mindfulness group or class can be useful for some, as you can be supported and guided by a teacher. However, if you are considering this, it can be a good idea to speak with the teacher first and make them aware that you have a trauma history and may be struggling with certain trauma symptoms. Explore whether the group is right for you. If in doubt, perhaps err on the side of caution. Extended meditation retreats are unlikely to be a good idea for those experiencing trauma symptoms. If using mindfulness to support recovery from trauma is something you really want to go farther with, the safest approach can be to work with a clinician who has training and experience in mindfulness and working clinically with those who experienced trauma. This concludes the audio for the chapter on being present and connected.